Welcome back to But This Time It's Different, the show where we unpack economic absurdity, political delusion, and the quiet militarization of things you thought were probably fine. I'm Sinead, a defense and aerospace economist, an investor, and somebody who now Googles floating armory way more than is probably appropriate.
And I'm Alex, a finance and technology writer who is grateful to the brave, I was going to say men and women, but probably primarily men in cargo shorts who are defending the global economy on the high seas.
A couple of episodes ago, we published on freight as an emerging market, and we kind of talked about how global shipping has stopped behaving like infrastructure and started behaving like a crazy speculative asset that hedge funds love. So topics around war risk insurance, hedge funds, container rate futures, it's all in there.
So today we're treating both our listeners to the sequel they didn't know they needed, which is the security side of that story, which we alluded to a little bit. Because when your $150 million oil tanker is moving through the Red Sea or the Gulf of Guinea, you don't call the Navy. You call a man probably with a one-syllable name. Well, I was about to say Gary, but Gary's a two-syllable name. But you call a man with a first name.
I think most people have first names, but yes, you will call someone. Let's call him Gary. Gary and his probably three-man team of private contractors. Let's just say ex-UK Special Forces. They have a shell company in Cyprus. Weapons stored on some sort of converted fishing trawler somewhere off Djibouti. All in, $45,000 a week, payable offshore.
Yeah, this is essentially Blackwater at sea, but with more beards, fewer rules, and I suspect significantly worse bandwidth.
Yeah, and today I am so excited. This is one of my favorite topics ever. We're taking you inside the murky, gloriously unregulated world of private maritime security. How it started, who's paying for it, and what it says about the global trade system we're all still pretending is safe and rules-based.
I hate spoilers as much as the next person, but it's not. Let's get into it. And to take a step back, the private maritime security industry, or guns for hire with floaties, really exploded during the Somali piracy boom in the late 2000s. This was when we first started seeing these super tankers getting hijacked. These slightly chaotic ransom negotiations would take place over satellite phones. And then money, millions of dollars, would literally be dropped out of helicopters in waterproof briefcases, and they'd sort of float towards the lads with the AKs, and then the people would usually get handed over afterwards.
Alex, did you ever watch the movie Captain Phillips?
No.
This is your homework. Okay, so this movie, you don't know what it is. I'm sure a lot of other people will. This was a Tom Hanks movie, but this was not just a movie. This was based on a real $18 billion a year economic problem. So at its peak, Somali pirates were attacking over 200 vessels a year. I mean, these guys are busy. They're holding hostages for an average of 7 months and collecting ransoms of up to $9 million per ship. And I need to say, full disclaimer here, I have been obsessed with pirates since I was a kid. Like the real pirates, not like the weird Disney pirates, okay? To the extent that I used to want an eye patch, and I find eye patches weirdly attractive.
Okay.
If any of our...
It's a terrifying insight into the Freudian hellscape that is your mind.
Right. So getting back to these Somalian pirates, and there are so many good books you can read about them. Somalia is this kind of collapsed state coastal economy where former fishermen turned to hijacking oil tankers because their fishing grounds had been stripped by foreign trawlers. The governments had disintegrated into fiefdoms and militias. Some of them were actually just teenagers, and other were ex-militia with RPGs and GPS and basically just a skiff. And they built an industry complete with pirate stock markets, profit-sharing agreements, and logistics crews managing hostages on shore. I mean, this honestly is not just a single one-off crime. They created this entire kind of micro-sovereignty around this. Pirate cartels controlled vast stretches of the sea, some even negotiating with clan elders and Islamic courts and these kind of weird informal banks to launder and redistribute ransom money. Shipping companies, they realized pretty quickly that waiting around for coordinated naval patrols from NATO or the EU or the US was like waiting for Godot. If Godot needed parliamentary approval and an aircraft carrier. And there's a really good podcast about why you were never allowed as a government to negotiate with the pirates.
Why aren't you allowed to negotiate with the pirates? Also, what's the liquidity like on a pirate stock market?
I think the liquidity ain't great because none of them can spend their money. I guess the reason you don't negotiate with pirates is the same reason you don't negotiate with terrorists.
We always do negotiate with terrorists, though. We always say we don't, but we always do.
I'm going to link the podcast. I hope it's still online somewhere. I'm going to find it. The United Nations had one guy sitting in an office in Somalia, and his job was to like figure out this pirate shit. And he did an unbelievably good podcast about his pirate-based existence and why he was and was not allowed to negotiate with them. I'll link it here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm shocked that the UN didn't live up to their usual standards and sort this one out. Yeah, these shipping companies realized they couldn't wait for world peace to break out and for children of all races to kind of dance together and sing. So they stopped waiting. And this is where our friend Gary comes in, who'll be an ex-Royal Marine, neck like a suspension bridge, who'll technically be retired, but will walk around in a kind of chinos and a raincoat with the same boots all these people wear, and will be freelancing. And shipping companies started hiring private teams of Gary-like figures who'd ride along with them on high-risk voyages. You'd normally get 2 to 4 contractors per ship. They'd bring semi-automatic rifles, body armor, and a flexible interpretation of international law. And it's fair to say that this actually did work for a while. It turns out that sometimes reasonably lightly armed teenagers are scared off when hench ex-Marines fire back at them. So pirate attacks plummeted between 2011 and 2017. Insurance premiums halved on a lot of routes. And then suddenly the most effective thing you could do for your $200 million container vessel was strap some ex-commandos to the railings and let them scan the horizon in shifts. And I think, Sinead, you have another conflict of interest to declare, because as well as liking pirates, it's fair to say that if not Gary himself, some Gary types.
I can't. This podcast is too much for me. I'm getting way too excited here. So, okay, I am conflicted. Not only did I start this story by being obsessed with the pirate half of this equation, but in my later life, through my kind of defense and military dealings, I have actually befriended and have come to really understand the other half of this industry through my pals who are, as we have said, ex-Marines that are now living off in Singapore, paying no tax and doing some sort of dodgy dealings offshore. Although they will never discuss it, and they certainly would not call it dodgy dealings. But it kind of did start as this, a few guys calling each other saying, right, we got a job this weekend, lads, let's go. It is now a full fucking industry. So you used to have these firms like Drum Cusack and Control Risks and Olive Group, loads of them. Many of them were spun out of these military consulting firms, EMC outfits, and just kind of bored veterans and maybe a startup lawyer that was going with them. Come 2013, over 140 private maritime security companies were operating in the Indian Ocean alone. And not only did they have this kind of quasi-startup lawyer that went with them, they had a full marketing team. The branding here was really phenomenal. They never called it hire a gun. They kind of called it maritime threat de-escalation, or some sort of non-lethal defense posturing, proactive threat interruption. I mean, if consulting is bad, I honestly think the maritime protection services might be even worse. And of course, all of this is just code for, we will shoot the shit out of you if you try to come anywhere near this boat that we're on.
Yeah, and it gets weird. Maybe you'll have some insight into this as well, but no one officially admits that these guys exist. They don't have a website or an Instagram account, to the best of my knowledge, because let's face it, shipping firms don't want lawsuits. Governments don't want to have to get involved. When insurers have to pay out less money because there are fewer hostage videos, they're pretty happy that it's not in their interest to ask too many questions. So this whole industry has grown up in the shadows, off the books, offshore, and often off the coast of Oman, which I'm planning a trip to at some point. So I'll see if I can spot any of them. And do you know how you find a Gary if you need one?
Yeah, you find a Sinead who finds you a Gary. I will hook you up with my Gary.
Are you advertising?
Disclaimer. Please do not contact me if you're going on a boat anytime soon and you want some guns. But I mean, as you alluded to, Alex, I mean, this actually worked. Piracy did fall and costs of shipping fell along with it. I mean, now this is a while back, obviously before the Houthis, an actually large terrorist state-backed organizations got involved, and it wasn't just kids in a skiff. But for about a decade, global trade was being physically protected by these kind of freelance soldiers with iPads, suppressors, and importantly, zero legal jurisdiction. And nobody said a thing because, hey, suddenly shipments were arriving on time.
Yeah, and sort of obviously people would assume that maybe oil tankers or grain carriers or those fuck off massive liquid natural gas super tankers, which are half the length of skyscrapers, like everyone assumes they'll hire these kinds of guys, but it's not only them, is it, Sinead?
Yeah, no, it's not. So this is a little bit outside of my depth of knowledge. I have never been on a cruise ship before. And of course, nothing says luxury like a 4-course dinner followed by a midnight watch with an M4 under the deck chairs. But yeah, the cruise liner industry is a massive, let's say, employer of such organizations. And when you've got 3,000 people in a cruise liner, and then you have a guy named Gary shadowing the buffet line in tactical gear, this is where we're at today.
Yeah, and the contracts I've heard for these things are reasonably amusing and sort of somewhat less euphemistic than some of what you were saying before. So the rules of engagement will be do not shoot unless fired upon or unless someone looks suspicious. I think the burden of proof is, again, somewhat lower in these parts of the world. The jurisdiction will be Panama, Liberia, the Cayman Islands, or wherever. Payment terms will be offshore accounts denominated in US dollars, sometimes Bitcoin, sometimes Rolexes, and yeah.
Well, let's talk about how they actually work. It's hard to get this information. Luckily, I have sourced it from my Gary. So these teams are usually 2 to 4 men. And it is mostly men. I have never come across a female Gary. Of course, all with names that sound like they came directly from ex-military. They board at port. They blend in like absolutely no one. And then they just kind of lurk around on deck until they hit somewhere like the Suez. They bring their own food, their own gear, their own comms equipment. And honestly, half the time the captain isn't even sure that they're there until it becomes very obvious because someone is trying to climb the ladder. And suddenly there's this guy in some sort of tan polo shirt aiming a scoped rifle.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want with your mercenaries. Like, it's pretty thoughtful of them to like bring their own stuff and, blend in as much as possible. But presumably, if you're going to be on a cruise liner, but also fend off attack, you've got to store your weaponry somewhere. You can't just carry guns openly into ports. So the industry has created one of the most hilarious concepts I've come across so far, which is these floating armories.
Yeah, and these are very real. So these are the kind of decommissioned cargo ships that are moored in, of course, international borders off Oman, near Sri Lanka, in the Red Sea. And they're stocked with everything from Kalashnikovs to encrypted radios. So think of them as Gary's favorite kind of duty-free for warfare. It's not Toblerone you're going for, but you'll get, your favorite suppressor, your scope, and honestly, just enough plausible deniability to keep everyone's conscience sedated.
Yeah, I'm guessing this is relatively unregulated. I'm assuming no central authority is monitoring these armories, checking the inventory, ensuring standardization. It has a delightfully 19th century feel to it.
It does. And it makes for a really good thriller book in case anyone's looking for plot twist. But to be clear, so in the last podcast, we talked about the price pressure and the global logistics pressure that all of these cargo ocean liners are under. Well, the clients actually know all of this. And shipping companies are under insane pressure to reduce their premiums and basically to do whatever they need to do to keep cargo moving. And more importantly, avoid the headlines. Although, when you have Gary shooting at someone on the side of the boat, I'm not sure reducing headlines is going to be the main outcome there. But think of it as this. They are deciding to choose the least bad option, which is to hire the guys who promise to keep pirates so far away from your ship and keep your boat out of the news. So, is there legal murkiness? Well, yeah, maybe. Because your insurer would rather process a defensive discharge than a hostage negotiation. This kind of flies. It works.
I mean, you say, Sinead, that the system's worked, but it probably has technically worked in the narrow sense of until quite recently fewer ships got attacked, but it has its downside. So imagine this, a private security guard on a flagged vessel in international waters shoots a Somali teenager in a skiff. But was he a pirate? Maybe he was a fisherman. Maybe he was a guy with bad GPS. Like, whose court system answers that? No one, or everyone, or maybe just the shipping company's PR department, hoping Reuters doesn't find out before they can spin up it was just a rogue actor press release. But in a way, we've created a system that really, really incentivizes the Garys of this world to shoot first and sort of ask questions later.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And here's the trick, right? So most of these ships fly what is called a flag of convenience, which basically means that instead of registering the vessel in the country where the ship owner actually lives or operates, they register it in a country that basically says, sure, you can fly our flag, we won't ask questions, and we definitely won't enforce maritime law. Now, this is a greatest hits collection, which includes unbelievably well-regulated countries like Panama, Liberia, the Marshall Islands. And so occasionally something like whatever island lets you carry assault rifles and skip the paperwork, yeah, this is where you're ultimately going to go to.
Yeah, so low taxes, no real labor regulations, no oversight. And quite often these countries will let you take their flag without ever docking there. So you see loads, like Liberia, I think, is pretty much one of the most common for this. And like, most of these ships will never have been to Liberia or anywhere near it. So you fill out some forms, wire some money, and congratulations, you are now a Liberian flagged crude carrier with some contractors called Gary and a crate of suppressed weapons.
Yeah, okay. But let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because I mean, it's the big ocean. Things do go wrong when you're dealing with pirates. This is what I like to call incident management international style. So let's talk about a real case. The Enrique Lexi case in 2012, very famous. Two Italian Marines, both serving as armed guards on an oil tanker off the coast of Kerala, India, saw what they thought was a pirate skiff. They opened fire, killed two Indian fishermen. It was not a pirate skiff.
Yes, there was some diplomatic fallout, and it wasn't the global rules-based order at its very best. So India, understandably, arrested the Marines. Italy stepped in and claimed sovereign immunity. And this rather undignified spectacle dragged on for about, I think, something like 8 years between Indian courts, international arbitration, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, and yeah, where did it land?
Well, the final outcome, as you said, 8 years later, and I actually had dinner in The Hague about a year ago with a woman who worked on this very case. So I even forgot about it until right this moment, but my life is far more pirate adjacent than I ever realized before today. But the court basically ruled that the Marines had immunity as state officials, but Italy still had to pay India over $1 million in compensation. So basically, look, we're sorry for the misunderstanding. Here's a check. Don't call it murder.
And I mean, in many ways, this was testing the legal system on easy mode, because this was with state actors, people employed by the Italian government on a flagged vessel. But like, imagine this scenario, but we have a private contractor via a third-party firm registered in Malta, working under a Liberian flag that doesn't even have to pretend its interest in the legal system, and their rules of engagement are shoot people who look at us funny. What's the accountability mechanism there?
Well, what do you think the accountability mechanism there is when you have a fisherman and you have a multi-billion-dollar, it could be ocean liner. So it's honestly usually an NDA, quiet settlement, some sort of dodgy wire transfer from an account in Dubai to one in Mauritius to one in Panama. No court, no trial, no vibes.
We talk a lot about just-in-time supply chains. This is just-in-time legality. Enough structure for everyone to sort of pretend it's legit, but enough ambiguity to get away with quite a lot.
So, Alex, why are we talking about this now? Well, as we mentioned in our last podcast, the global shipping industry, let's say, is under attack again. Literally, the Red Sea has become a missile range. Pirates are back big time in the Gulf of Guinea. And nobody, not insurers, not navies, certainly not multilateral alliances, trusts the system to hold.
Which means that the armed private contractors are back once again protecting the arteries of the global economy. And it's no longer a last resort. It's part of the default operating system.
Yeah, and this isn't just a story about mercenaries like Gary with GoPros. It's more about what happens when states step back and markets have to step in. So when the price of a shipping lane is measured in blood, bandwidth, and this very legal gray zone, and when the rules-based order stops being enforced and is instead subcontracted to anyone basically with a satellite phone and a 3-man team.
Yeah, because I'm afraid, unfortunately, you can't have global capitalism without global security. And when governments can't get their act together, which they kind of really haven't in these parts of the world, the private sector will always improvise. And maybe that's actually beautiful. But this isn't the return of piracy, really. It's privatized sovereignty where, enforcement, deterrence, and yes, violence are up for hire.
Wow. On that very positive note, and this sounds like a very fragile way to run the planet, mostly because it is, we're going to leave it there. Thank you for listening to But This Time It's Different. If you liked this episode, we're going to put a subscribe button somewhere. This is going to be a thing. So we're going to do it.
It's going to be so professional.
Hit it or click it or something. And send us your favorite floating armory photos, because I'm sure you're all going to go and try and find these things just outside of the Mauritian waters. Until next time.
See you then.